Now, the vice presidential debate between Republican Senator J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Walz just wrapped up about 20 minutes ago. And I have to say that the results were somewhat unexpected. While I thought that Governor Tim Walz was going to edge this one out, I have to say, in my opinion, J.D. Vance unequivocally overperformed expectations and actually won this debate. Now, if you didn't tune in, there were 7 issues discussed on the topics: Israel, climate change, immigration, abortion, guns, healthcare, and also democracy. Now, in today's short video, I'll be giving you a summary of today's debate, as well as discuss each of the 7 aspects discussed in this debate. Now, first of all, why did I believe that J.D. Vance actually won? Well, I believe that J.D. Vance was actually significantly more confident than Tim Walz. At least at the start of the debate, Tim Walz looked slightly nervous, while J.D. Vance looked significantly more confident, despite being a political outsider and someone you would not expect to actually be able to win in a debate. Additionally, it did seem like that Tim Walz stumbled slightly in some of the different segments in the debate. Now, of course, stumbling a little bit is not that big of a deal, especially when you compare it to how much Joe Biden stumbled in the first presidential debate. But nevertheless, that was something notable, especially since he's been debating for a long time, since 2006, while J.D. Vance only attended a few debates in his entire political career, which is quite short. Additionally, I believe that J.D. Vance narrated his story much better than Tim Walz. For example, take the example on climate change. Climate change is usually a D+30 issue. Democrats consistently win in a debate on climate change. However, the narrative I've heard from different voters who are kind of undecided was that J.D. Vance was actually able to win because he was able to illustrate his side of the story, that it would be preferable for some of these jobs to remain in the US as opposed to overseas. Again, that was something I feel like that was appealing to a lot of voters who I had talked to after the debate. Additionally, it just seemed like that, Tim Walz, as someone who was more politically experienced, both of them did hedge on some questions, but I felt like that Tim Walz, although he hedged on a similar number of questions as J.D. Vance, those hedges seemed to have been a bit more obvious than J.D. Vance. Now, on the 7 topics I discussed, I believe that J.D. Vance won at least on 3 fronts: Israel, climate change, and immigration. 3 were kind of a tie, while Walz seemed to have won on the issue of healthcare. At least that's what my opinion is, as well as a lot of voters who are undecided who I've talked to kind of agree with me on those fronts. Now, the first issue discussed was Israel. Now, handling the Middle East is definitely not something that Joe Biden did very well in his first term. Nevertheless, someone like J.D. Vance, who is so politically inexperienced, I thought may have faltered on the question. However, he did really, really well. But while Walz kind of like dodged a question and kind of blamed everything on Donald Trump, he was like, Trump caused all this chaos. Trump is to blame for all of these issues. That's not something that's going to resonate with a lot of voters who actually want real solutions as opposed to a lot of blaming. Now, Walz kind of, said, this is all Trump's fault and stuff, but I felt like that Vance was able to get some attacks in while also being able to lay out his solution and his answer to the questions. And that's why, based on the news articles I've read, including the Washington Post, right out of the audience that watched the debate, only 6 people said that Walz was won on that front, while Vance, 16 people said Vance won that on that issue. At least that's according to the Washington Post survey of swing state voters, which is something I find quite significant. Now, the second issue here was climate change. Again, I said that someone like Tim Walz, probably because Democrats generally win on this issue, was probably going to win climate change. However, it turns out that, again, according to this Washington Post article, only 9 people thought Walz won on this issue, and Vance had 13 votes. And even some people who said that, they supported Kamala Harris said that Tim Walz won because he was able to articulate the issue in a more favorable manner. He did not really say that, climate change is a hoax, and even someone like Tim Walz, the Democratic candidate, had to acknowledge that J.D. Vance had some real and pretty factually based points. That was something that Tim Walz gave as a concession to JD Vance, something that generally historically doesn't happen. Democrats generally pound the Republicans on this issue, but it doesn't seem like in this debate that actually happened. Now, the third issue was immigration, and it's unsurprising that, of course, JD Vance was able to win on immigration. This is a huge issue for the Republican Party and the driving force to how Republicans will probably be able to win this election. Now, Democrats argued that Walz had a more humanitarian approach to immigration, while JD Vance was someone who was more fearful, while Republicans said that, Vance was able to illustrate how he was able to curb this illegal immigration. Personally, I think that because of the political environment and because people are increasingly doubtful of immigration, especially due to high prices and some of the concerns that immigrants may have caused, that JD Vance did end up winning on this issue. Now, the fourth issue here was the issue of abortion. Vance essentially said that abortion should be left to the states. The way he narrated it was, I believe, quite well. Now, generally, Democrats still win on the issue of abortion, but I felt like this was kind of a tie because on one hand, Democrats generally win on this issue, but on the other, JD Vance was someone who was able to articulate the idea of leaving these abortions to quote-unquote popular sovereignty. While the mainstream Republican position on abortion is not very popular, JD Vance was able to illustrate it quite well, and when Tim Walz was asked to kind of rebut that claim, I don't think he did it very effectively. Now on the next question here about gun control and school shootings. While Democrats generally have the upper hand on actually stopping school shootings, at least this is public perception, and Republicans generally have the upper hand on the Second Amendment issue, I do believe that this was kind of a tie. JD Vance, he talked about some of the issues about gun control, while Tim Walz, he proposed something, but I don't think it was very effective, especially the way he worded the issue. Overall, it was kind of a tie. Now, the next question here was about healthcare, and also, in extensions, kind of related to the issue of abortion. Now, most voters felt that Tim Walz was able to win on the healthcare issue. That being said, he could have definitely capitalized it on a bit more, while JD Vance, I believe, was quite articulate and quite effective on that issue as well. It was still leaning towards Tim Walz, just because healthcare is generally an issue that has become increasingly more popular, at least on the Democratic side of things. And right now, about 60% of Americans do ultimately approve of Obamacare, which is up from about 40% when the law was actually signed into place back in around 2010. Now, overall, in terms of what I saw in this debate, I definitely felt like that Tim Walz was quite weak. He is somewhat of an experienced politician. He has been in government for close to 20 years. Yet someone like JD Vance, who is a political newcomer, someone who doesn't have a lot of political experience, was actually able to answer questions at least as good as Tim Walz, if not better. Additionally, someone like JD Vance did hedge on some questions, but he answered more questions, in my opinion, than Tim Walz, who kind of dodged the issue a lot of times. Now, both candidates kind of talked about their own upbringings and tried to portray themselves as pretty good individuals. But I feel like that overall, JD Vance did get the message across more effectively than Tim Walz, and that is why I believe that JD Vance won. Additionally, JD Vance's message on quote-unquote change is very effective, because after all, the vast majority of Americans disapprove of the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration, and still something that's good to emphasize on when you kind of tie Tim Walz to Kamala Harris, and by extension, Joe Biden. Thank you for watching today's video. Be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye. Just as I was wanting to end this video, I see that some of the exit polls have been coming in. Now, in the Washington Post sample that I just discussed a few minutes ago, there were 9 people in these swing states that preferred Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and 11 people preferred Donald Trump and JD Vance. Now, in this survey, it found that of those 22 people, and there were 2 undecided people who could go either way, only 8 people believed that Tim Walz performed better, while 14 people believed that Vance performed better. Now, even when you consider the partisanship breakdown of these voters, you can see that essentially all of the Vance and Trump supporters thought that Vance was able to win, in addition to the 2 undecided voters, plus 1 voter that was saying that they were going to vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. So you can see that Walz ended up performing worse than JD Vance, which is something that's quite substantial. Now, what are going to be the implications of this in the actual general election? So far, we don't know that much because generally VP debates don't shape things out that much, but it's definitely going to give Donald Trump a boost because, of course, like a lot of the Republicans I talked to thought that Tim Walz might actually win, and right now it looks like some of the Democrats are the ones that saying that, you know, JD Vance was the one that won. So it definitely does look better for the Trump ticket, especially since it kind of dispels some of the notions that JD Vance is someone who's grossly inexperienced. Turns out he was able to do better than the one who was actually more experienced, Tim Walz. So I definitely believe at this point in time, based on public opinion, my own opinion, as well as my conversations with some of these voters who are, in some cases, from the swing states, I do believe that JD Vance was able to win this debate. Anyways, thank you for watching today's video. Be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.